the weekly show with David J. Maloney.
This week, David chats with legendary character actor Elya Baskin.
And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the weekly show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. On tonight's show, we've got the next part of my interview with actor Elya Baskin. Ilya's life and career has seen him work with some of the best actors and actresses in the film industry, from Robin Williams in Moscow on the Hudson, to Helen Mirren and Roy Scheider in 2010, The Year We Make Contact, to Harrison Ford and Gary Oldman in Air Force One, and to Sean Connery in The Name of the Rose. Even if you don't immediately recognize his name, you will most likely recognize his face. After the break, we have actor Elya Baskin back with us again. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. So in that film, you play the part of a Soviet cosmonaut unit with many actors whom had lives that had, I think, kind of taken a similar course to yours, no? I mean, I think Natasha Schneider might have been from Latvia herself, right? So what was it like being able to work with so many people with stories like yours? Or had you had the opportunity to do that in other places prior to this film?
No, I met a lot of ex-Soviets while filming Moscow on the Hudson. So it wasn't the first time, but and I did some television things that there were a couple of actors that I worked with before. There was a very close friend of mine. He was a big star in Russia and also left too early. Savely Kramarov, who played the main KGB guy in Moscow on the Hudson. And he played one of the cosmonauts in 2010. No, it was, we all liked each other, and some you liked a little more than the others, but it's life, you know.
Now, given these two major films happened kind of back to back on it, I mean, what did it feel like for you in those moments? I mean, having, you know, immigrated here and everything else, did it feel surreal? Did it feel like it was real life?
It was. The one thing I didn't mention, that before I left Soviet Union, I was in a very popular miniseries in Russia, and I was a recognizable actor. Many people didn't know my name, but my face, I mean, I was walking the streets and everybody was like saying hi or pointing at me. So that wasn't new to me, this feeling of recognition. After 2010, people would come up, take pictures and stuff like that, even after Moscow on the Hudson. And so that kind of, I was already familiar with, and didn't change anything in my life. But did I feel lucky? Of course I felt lucky, because when you remember, we were talking about getting into the theater school was a big challenge, because when I saw so many people, and the same thing for when I decided to emigrate, everybody said, "Oh, you have to learn a new skill. I mean, learn programming, or computers are big now, or do something else." And I had the same stubbornness as I had when I was applying to school. So no, I'll try to make it here. And that's that's actually for the younger viewers in your audience. It's a good thing to remember that if you really want something, go for it. Don't listen to other people. You need to be patient, you need to work hard, but just don't listen to what people say around you.
Especially the negative stuff. Now, you had said earlier that your parents, were reasonably supportive. Were they still in Latvia, USSR at the time that these movies hit, and were they able to see either of those films?
No, they were already here.
Okay.
They came a year after, because strange enough, when I immigrated, I didn't come from Riga. I was living and working in Moscow, because I went to college in Moscow. I stayed there for another 5 years, working in a theater company. And it was more difficult to immigrate for younger people. Older people, and especially in Latvia, it was much easier. So when I said goodbye to my parents when I was leaving, of course, I didn't know for 100% will I see them again, but I knew that there was a good chance that I will. And that's what happened. I brought them in a year later.
So the next film that kind of sticks out to me is The Name of the Rose with Sean Connery. And once again, you find yourself alongside another great in the industry. How did you find out about that role, and how did you land that one?
I think Jean-Jacques Anew, who directed it, saw me in those two films that you mentioned before and knew, and he actually asked for me. And I almost turned it down because I was on the verge of getting a pilot for a television series. And there was I was with William Morris, a good agency, and we had a very big debate with my agent, and she wanted me to do television series because it was more money. I mean, if the series never...
if it takes off, it's more money.
It never took off, yeah. So I made the right choice. And it was a fantastic experience. I mean, the whole thing. If you know, it was filmed in two countries. The first country was Germany, and it was a real 13th century.
Classic.
Yeah, Kloster Eberbach. And the second part of the film was filmed near Rome, where they built the replica of this monastery, because if you remember the film, it burns down, and they needed to burn it down. And they couldn't do it with the real monastery, so they built the replica near Rome. And Jacques Anew, when we all came to the set in Germany, they dressed all the extras. We didn't film that day, just to show the set. He had extras, he had goats, chickens running around. It was like you immersed yourself in a different century. It was so strange and so wonderful.
So when did you first meet Sean, and what do you remember about him?
Sean, I met the day we went to see the set. I was telling you about a few seconds ago. And I actually had a line that I knew I'll tell him. Paul Maslansky says hi. He worked with Paul in Moscow on a film Red Tent, and they became good friends. So that right away got us like, what can I tell about Sean Connery? It's one of the greatest actors, and wonderful, wonderful, fun to be around man who can talk about any subject. You start talking about any sophisticated subject, and in 3 minutes you would be talking golf.
You know, in many of your roles we've talked about so far, you've brought this kind of sense of depth and dignity to characters, some of which could have been played as caricatures. And why do you think you're able to play these kinds of characters in that way, with so much depth and dignity in that way?
I have no idea.
It just is.
I mean, so many things that surprised me in this life. After I did the rather small part in Spider-Man 2 and 3, all of a sudden, this gave me more recognition than any other films and bigger parts that I ever done. I mean, there are so many memes, even now on the internet. Go punch in Mr. Ditkovich and you'll see my face in different, and I'm flying.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, there's YouTube videos, there's just all these give me rent
Yeah.
all that Give Me Rent memes and YouTube videos and different things. They've changed different things. It's interesting where you've done all these characters with so much depth, and then it kind of reminds me of like Christopher Walken. He talks about how he's had all these great characters, but yet he's known for Cowbell from Saturday Night Live by a younger generation. You know what I mean? Of people, where here he was in Deer Hunter and in all these incredible things. And here you've done all this great work, and people remember Give Me Rent. So let's talk about Reagan, because that's one of the more recent ones that you're in, and I know that it's also a project that, you know, aspects of it were kind of near and dear to your heart. You've considered, if I'm not mistaken, you've called this one of the more important roles you've played. Why is that?
Because first of all, I was a big Ronald Reagan fan. I mean, to me, he was the greatest president in my lifetime in the United States. And I loved his sense of humor. I like everything about it. I liked his politics. I'm not going to, not 100%, I mean, but there's nobody that's 100% perfect. So, but he was my favorite president. So being invited, and again, I didn't audition for this part. I played a dissident, for a Soviet dissident who escaped to America. He was working for the government and tried to explain people that all the propaganda that they hear about how beautiful life is in the Soviet Union. And you know why it happened, because Stalin invited all the famous writers and from America, from Europe, and showed them Russia that didn't exist.
Yeah, they just showed him this snapshot that they wanted them to see.
Yeah, it's called Potemkin Village. It's something that where they paint the grass green. You know, it's everything is specially designed to impress those. And when they came back, they were fooled, and there were so many articles about people who were famous, and the population trusted them, and it was all fake. And this guy who I played, he was telling them that it was a fake, that the real life is much different. He was talking about famine. He was talking about gulag, and how miserable life was. That's when young Reagan first time he heard him, and there was a very good scene. Unfortunately, it's not in the film because of the young Reagan. I don't know if I'm actually allowed to say that, but maybe I will not mention any names. So he had a fiancée. He was in that church where I gave a speech. He was with her, and the producers and directors, they, for some reason, didn't like the actress. And they cut all the scenes with her out of the film. So my most interesting scene wasn't there, where we had like one-to-one talk with young Reagan. They had cut it because she was in that scene. But it was good to be in a project that was involving my favorite person.
It seemed like there were a lot of actors in that movie who, and even people who weren't actors, who had roles in the movie, either not necessarily playing themselves, but playing people within the same scene. Like, I remember there being a scene that the real Pat Boone was involved in, but then Pat Boone played the role of the pastor, I think.
Yeah.
But in the scene that he was actually really at as himself when he was young, and there were a lot of interesting things in there that if you watch the movie and you kind of know the history a little bit yourself, that they're not really Easter eggs. They're just clever. And you could tell that some of these people are people that, like you, had a love of him as the president and therefore wanted to be part of this.
More than that, when I couldn't support myself as an actor, with my very good friend, we started a business, and that business was a Russian language newspaper. It still exists, but I don't own it anymore, and my friends sold it. And, it's a Russian language weekly. It was an American paper, but we had a lot of journalists who immigrated working for us, good ones. And one of them was named Yuri Bezmenov. Yuri Bezmenov, if I'll spell it out for you, take a look. I think you can find him on YouTube. He was a real thing. He was a real Russian defector who dressed up as a hippie in India. He was working for the news agency, Soviet news agency in India. Dressed up as a hippie and through Pakistan escaped. And then he lived in Canada for a while. But he was doing the same thing my character was doing in the film Reagan. He was working for our paper, but at the same time he was going around lecturing people about the real works of KGB. And I strongly advise you to. You'll be surprised.
Huh.
Yuri Bezmenov, Bezmenov.
So that's interesting because there probably were more than one, you would think, of people that would do stuff like that. But I remember in the movie that it being kind of, even though it was a kind of a shorter scene, especially since they edited out that other part, but it was a pivotal point between that and him reading the book that made a big impact on the direction that Reagan's life took. So that part, in some sense, was playing a character, made a huge impact, from what I understand, in Reagan's life overall.
It did. This Kirschman character, that was the first time he heard that everything he was reading, and it was all propaganda. It was not true.
It opened his eyes and started and planted a political seed in him that he didn't know he had, probably.
Right. Yes.
So it makes sense. We kind of skipped over Air Force One, which you were in with Harrison Ford and Gary Oldman. So first you get to work with Indiana Jones's father, and then you get to work with Indiana Jones himself. So what was it like working on that film, sit in the upper deck of the 747 with Gary and Harrison for all those takes? I mean, is there a memory that sticks out to you the most from shooting that film?
Yeah, I was like a child in a toy store. You remember I told you that before getting involved in theater, I loved all kinds of transportation. So they built a replica of a cockpit of 747. And whenever I had the chance, when we were not filming, I was sitting there flying this plane all around the world. It was so wonderful. I had two instructors. And if you remember the film, I was the pilot who we took over the plane. Yeah, and I had two instructors from United Airlines. And they taught me which buttons to, and why you push this and why. So I thought if I get kidnapped somewhere in the air in the real life, I knew how to fly the plane, because then I knew what is flaps, what is air brake.
That's fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And plus it was, we got a pretty good relationship with Gary. A very funny man, very talented man. Harrison was nice, but he was a little starish. He was a little distant, but it was an interesting time. Everything was fantastic. I was doing, before that, I was at the part, I was like recurring on Mad About You. And then I got this offer, and again, should I do the film or should I stay with the series? And just when I read the script, I knew I would do the film.
So, a role of yours that I found quite interesting is your portrayal of Anatoly Dobrynin in the film 13 Days, because you play a real-life Soviet diplomat while being an immigrant from a Soviet country yourself, while portraying one of the most important diplomatic meetings of our time, a meeting that quite possibly saved the world. What was it like acting with all those things? Kind of, did you feel like it was laying on your shoulders, or was it because it was historical? It was just you were going to do the job, or how did you approach that?
First, I read everything I could about this period. I read everything I could about Dobrynin, and I met a couple of people who knew him personally, so I could do a bit of sort of adjustment with my body, and that's about it. That's about it. It was an interesting role.
Well, that one had obviously the political aspects of it. Obviously, Reagan has the political aspects of it. And one of the things I did want to ask you was, although the Reagan movie, the story is about Reagan, obviously, it's kind of told from the viewpoint of a spy who was following Reagan. At any point in your career after you came here, especially after you used the word, when you leave, they kind of characterize you as a traitor or anything like that. And with everything being the way that it was at the time you came here, did you ever feel like maybe the Soviet government was keeping tabs on you because you became a little bit more high profile after that? Did you feel any eyeballs at any point, or is that just the crazy American in me thinking more than I should about it?
I think it's crazy American.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I didn't feel. The guy who played the main KGB guy in Moscow on the Hudson, Savely, who passed away very young. He was a huge star in Russia. I wasn't. I mean, people would recognize me, but he was. I mean, there was no. You couldn't find a person who didn't know him, and he was the biggest comedian in Russian film. And he was a little nervous about it because he played a KGB man, and he told me that I kind of feel a little uncomfortable. But that was the only time when I even thought about it.
One thing I did want to ask you is, do you have any input or advice for young immigrant artists trying to find their voice in whether it be this country or new culture in general?
It's not only immigrant actors or whoever. I mean, just as we talked before, that there are a lot of negativity around, and the people try to scare you. Just believe in yourself, and if you really do, just go for it. I mean, you, like in the theater schools in Russia, I know people who are very successful, very famous now, but they couldn't get in from the first attempt. I mean, some of them from third, some of them in fourth. But they really they knew that that's what the life, and they became very successful and very popular. So trust in yourself more than people who try to scare you. And don't waste your time. I was listening yesterday, I was listening to a song, Enjoy Yourself, It's Later Than You Think. A guy Lombardi, I think, wrote it, or played it. And it was kind of, now when I'm almost 75, I think I would change the lyrics. Don't waste your time, it's later than you think.
Very, very smart words. Ilya, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, David. Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elya Baskin. That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to actor Elya Baskin for joining us once again. Stay safe, everyone.